Had us all saying, I don't believe it. The story involved a mother, her newborn baby girl, and the heroic deed of this young man.
Well, I went to the house in Maidstone and there was young Philip Dams, and he was really chuffed with what he'd done.
And what Philip had done was deliver his aunt's baby all by himself.
She laid down, and then I knew she had the baby. So I just got its head and pulled it out.
Another story which brought gasps of disbelief was the runaway train near Ramsgate. It ended up suspended 70 feet above the ground, teetering on a brick pillar. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but it made the residents of these homes sleep uneasily in their beds. And in another extraordinary event, it was a case of now you see her, now you don't, when Miss Whiplash dashed. Lindy St. Clair's Jaguar car was found abandoned near Beachy Head. Was it murder, kidnap or suicide, or just another publicity stunt? Police launched a massive hunt, but she turned up on a Caribbean cruise liner. She came back to face the music and the taxman. It wasn't all plain sailing on the roads. The year got off to a treacherous start. First came thick fog, then hurricane-force winds reaching 75 miles an hour lashed the region. The London-bound carriageway of the M2 was transformed into a scrapyard with a 60-car pile-up. One person died and 27 others were injured.
It was just hazy fog, and then all of a sudden there was just a complete blank wall of fog. It was just like hitting a complete wall.
This is the worst possible start to the new year on the roads of the southeast.
The gales came on January the 13th, unlucky for some. Eastbourne Prom was typical of the battering all along the south coast. The fury of wind and waves damaged the sea wall. In Kent, 2 lorries overturned. In Sussex, there were more than 50 emergency calls in less than 2 hours. This fallen tree trapped an elderly couple inside their home in Rotherfield. But the bad weather broke early. On March the 11th, with 10 more days of winter officially to run, record temperatures along the south coast plunged us into an early summer. Our intrepid reporter Gavin Hill took advantage of the warm spell.
Well, the sun's out, the sky's blue, there's not a cloud to spoil the view, and I'm told the water's lovely. It's not true.
That'll teach you to strip off for the cameras, Gavin. But there were to be very few bright moments for the families who were plunged into a terrible darkness. Murder was on the minds of several people. Their victims ranged from a schoolgirl to a newly married couple to a middle-aged husband. The grief felt by Claire Tiltman's parents was enormous. Hers was the first murder case of the year. The 16-year-old schoolgirl was stabbed to death as she walked through this alleyway at Greenhive near Dartford. Facing the cameras for the first time, her father Cliff spoke of their agony over losing their only daughter.
That's what I've said to the doctor and everyone else. Do you know anyone that's got a tablet for a broken arm? That's all I can say.
Nearly a year on, Claire's killer is still at large. The brutal double murder of businessman Harry Fuller and his bride Nicola shocked the quiet Sussex village of Wadhurst. The newlyweds were gunned down in their home. A man is in custody, charged with their murders. The face of an unlikely-looking criminal, Jean Dado dubbed the evil Black Widow. She was the scheming wife who took out a murder contract on the husband she hated. Terry Dado was blasted to death as he opened the front door of their Sussex home. She's behind bars for 14 years, along with the hitman she hired. The revelation of the year was the leak of the Channel Tunnel rail link. Details of the route came into Meridian Tonight's possession late one March afternoon. This is how we broke the news. Exclusive on Meridian Tonight, the route of the high-speed rail link through Kent.
In fact, we've just received a statement which says this document was clearly not meant for public consumption before the announcement of the route by the Secretary of State in the House of Commons. They won't discuss it, but they can confirm this is the route.
Our reporter Hugh Kirby gave the details of the route from our newsroom. Seconds later, the phone lines were red hot with people anxious to know if it was going to pass near them. As Union Rail started their work, scenes of protest became almost a weekly ingredient in our nightly news programme. The argument spawned a new series, Rail Trail. with Lloyd Bracey covering every mile of the proposed route. But it wasn't an announcement of a different nature that spread panic among thousands of women. A gynecologist who was practicing at 2 hospitals in the Medway towns had been diagnosed HIV positive. Hundreds of Terence Shuttleworth's former patients contacted All Saints and the private Alexandra Hospital within a few hours of special helplines opening. But blood tests on the women were negative. Terence Shuttleworth died a month after his illness was made public. This man also made the medical history books, but for a happier reason. Benjamin Sternham was registered blind, but then he got cleaning with Mr. Sheen. Accidentally, he sprayed the fluid into his eyes, and hey presto.
I could see out the garden, I could see out the fence, I could see the cars, I could see the houses. I was going mad. I thought, what's going wrong?
The bizarre, serious, or downright silly all have a place in our nightly news programme. Who'd have thought a piece of Tibetan cheese would come under the hammer at Sotheby's for £1,000? The successful bidder was the cheese man himself from the television programme What's Up Doc, made at our Maidstone studios. But it's those shaggy dog or wet ferret stories that always leave us wanting more. We met Prudence the pig, who actually laughs at jokes, good or bad.
I went in the butcher's this morning. I said, pound of bacon, mate. He said, lean back. I said, pound of bacon, mate.
It was no joke, though, when Macduff, the fastest ferret in the southeast, died. But new pretender Tiny proved he's just as quick off the mark. Forget ferrets or even greyhounds. At this racetrack at Sterngate, these Afghan hounds prove they can whip the whippets. While over at the Rumpels pub in Peasmarsh, where creatures great and small prop up the bar with the locals, reporter Jonathan Marlin proved he can mix perfectly with animals.
It's the kind of a pub where you can take the ferret out of your trousers and leave it on the bar with your loose change.
Thank you, Jonathan. In my next look at the year, I'll be focusing on the summer months. Keep your sunny side up.
The sun has got his hat on. Hip, 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 hooray!
Oh, would you like to be beside the seaside? Oh, would you like to be beside the sea?
Until then, I'll leave the final word with a Sussex woman who's potty about spotty dogs. 101 of them, to be precise, and here's why.
They're always so happy every day. They're all waggy tail. They're never depressed. You never find a depressed Dalmatian.
And with this little lot for company, that's just as well.
And tomorrow night, Alison will be spotting more of the highlights of the year. That's between June and August. It's time now to continue our look at the news of 1993. Tonight, Alison Holloway reviews the stories we brought you between May and August.
Well, as a summer, it was hardly memorable for the weather, but there was plenty happening on the news front. Here's Ali.
Gales in June, the coldest night ever recorded in July, and frost by August. This was the summer when the weather couldn't make its mind up.
In the summertime, when the weather is high, you can stretch right up and touch the sky. When the weather's fine, you got women who can have a drink, have a drive, go out and see what you can find.
People found the River Darrant drying up before the rain, and this was after. Buell water before and after. Not much of a summer, but at least the years of drought were well and truly over.
1993 was the year when the global warming debate went onto the back burner, so to speak. After 3 or 4 hot, dry summers, all the talk about growing bananas in the southeast disappeared into the distance, and we were back to square one with a typical English summer.
And the mood of the southeast was like the weather, changeable. Elation, a woman from Sevenoaks stands on top of Everest. Despair, a little boy from Essex loses the struggle to stay alive. Wicked, she killed her auntie to get at her money. And wonderful, a sublime summer serenade. On conquering Everest, Rebecca Stevens screamed into her radio. She'd become the first British woman to climb Everest. People from her home village, Kemsing, celebrated in style while Rebecca was taking a well-earned rest.
She's really very tired. So she's settling down in her sleeping bag, and hopefully she'll get a really good sleep.
At last, sleep overtook little Stuart Masters. The 3-year-old from Southend had spent more than half his life in hospital and died there, peacefully with his family around him. Stuart needed a double transplant, but never made it, even though well-wishers had raised more than £500,000.
He was marvellous. The life he'd had and all the problems with his health. He was still such a happy little boy. He'd never known anything different, and it was as though he got on with his life. He was so wonderful, you know.
Life is precious, but this woman took a life, that of an elderly relative, and she did it for greed. Sheila Bowler, strong-willed and bossy according to police, was a 63-year-old music teacher who couldn't wait for her inheritance. So she threw her 89-year-old aunt in the River Brede at Winchelsea, telling police that Auntie Flo stumbled in there all on her own. The jury didn't believe her, but Sheila Bowler was apparently unconcerned while waiting for their verdict. A different verdict on this man? Brilliant. Pavarotti fell in love with Leeds Castle one summer's evening, and thousands of people fell in love with him. Pavarotti delighted the sellout crowd who called him back for 5 encores. He revelled in their appreciation.
Great atmosphere here, I have to say. I would like to spend here the honeymoon. If I am going to be married again once, I will come here for the honeymoon.
48 hours earlier, Pavarotti had jetted into Biggin Hill in a private jet and taken up residence at Leeds Castle. It was love at first sight. But it was a different tune at County Hall. Blue Rinse had become red-faced as the Tories were kicked out, losing control of all 4 South East counties. The 3 main parties seem to be saying that in future no one would really be running County Hall.
There won't be a lot of political infighting. We should come up with a common-sense solution.
No, I don't think it will work, but we'll give the people what they're wanting. Chaos.
We're not intending to go into any pacts at the moment. We have absolutely no intention of looking at other parties to do deals with. I see no reason why we shouldn't run this county altogether.
Months later, the winners' cheers are almost forgotten. Now the government's talking about closing county halls. With crime prevention on the agenda, at least one thief found that crime really doesn't pay. He was caught after burgling the Chief Constable of Kent. He did it just as police were announcing a crackdown on crimes against property, their war on housebreakers.
I regard someone breaking into the home of someone else as the most serious of offenders, certainly equating with physical assault.
The luckiest escape of the summer when a light aircraft crash-landed on the M2, colliding with a coach, and the pilot survived. The biggest mass arrest of the summer on a fruit farm near Ashford. More than 80 workers were rounded up by police and immigration officers. 59 illegal immigrants were told to leave the country. The worst fire of the summer, a shopping complex on the outskirts of Maidstone, was completely destroyed. The blaze gutted Tesco's at Grove Green. People could smell the food frying from miles away. And the cause? A fire started on purpose in a nearby rubbish skip. But there was plenty to smile about. Remember the fastest larder on wheels? Forget the raciest Reliant and the speediest Skoda. This was the Russian runabout raced by Russ from Ramsgate, who reckons it's the fastest of its type in Britain. He issued a challenge.
I'll throw the gauntlet down. If anyone out there thinks they've got a faster larder, we'll sort it out.
And Russ is still waiting for someone to take his crown. And last but not least, an encounter with the region's smallest sporting star. Phil Hornby, no, he was the reporter.
By far the best thing about being a political correspondent is that when Parliament goes into recess, you're allowed back into the real world. And so it was during the summer that I was sent along to Essex to meet a snooker superstar. Although I must confess, when I first saw him, I couldn't believe my eyes.
Sydney the Whirlwind Wilson has been playing ever since he could walk, which is a good few months. At his home at Leigh-on-Sea, Sydney's not only on top of the game, he's also on top of the table. But after his post-match drink, he ends up legless, under the table.
And the last part of our look back at the year tomorrow night. Now, sports. Southend United suffered a setback last night when they were beaten 1-0.